Welcome to episode 147 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer director J.J. Abrams, as well as his creator, Bad Robot Universe. And on today's edition of the show, we'll be talking about season 1 of What About Brian, episode 2, entitled 2 in 24. So, Matt, I don't know how many times I have to tell you, I am secure in my own manliness to get my own dates. I don't know. I don't know what I have to do to convince you and our friends that I'm able to get my own dates. I am my own man.
And that's what Brian certainly thinks. As, you know, we mentioned last week, the pilot ended with a scene that was clearly reshot, where Brian went to brunch and all of a sudden he was set up on a date with this Lisa woman who Marjorie had invited for him. And that's exactly where we pick up here in the first scene. And as Brian thinks that Lisa has left, he goes off on his friends and he gives the speech you just passionately gave about, like, I'm not going to be this passive dude who just watches everybody couple up and life pass him by. I can get my own dates and I don't need you guys setting me up. And then he gives this speech, and then right away, Lisa comes back because she forgot her phone, and she says, "Hey, you want to go on a date sometime?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay." And then all of his friends are peering over the corner of the room, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, you were right." They set him up, and he's gonna go on a date. So I thought that was a hilarious moment to start the episode on, because it was really funny, because Barry Watson gets to step up and give this big impassioned speech, and then he gets to do a complete 180 and has to tuck his tail between his legs because his friends were right to do this. So I thought that was a nice, light way to start the episode, to let us know that some of the heaviness of that pilot was just table setting, and the tone of this show in general is going to be kind of light and fun, even when we're dealing with, like, the romantic misadventures and the adultery misadventures of some of the other things going on.
The next scene that we see is Dina and Dave sitting around a couch while they're watching a cartoon video with their children. And Dave is trying to say to Dina that he is not comfortable having an open marriage. Dina is sort of trying to convince Dave that it's a good idea, that if they have an open marriage, this will be better for them. They will learn to discover things about each other that they wouldn't have known previously. And I love the code word that they use to talk about the possibility of having an open marriage together. They say drinking milk, right? If we drink this milk, perhaps when we drink milk together, it'll be better. So what did you think about that scene?
I think that it was interesting because we know that last episode, Dave really had a reversal on this idea once he sat down and thought about it. And he is not comfortable opening up the marriage because he doesn't actually think that there's anything wrong right now. He still finds Dina attractive. He's still full speed ahead. And when they use this metaphor of drinking milk, it's so they can have this conversation while their kids are around. And that is becoming a big obstacle for them, is that the kids are always around. And anytime they try and have a moment together, the kids are interrupting. And so, you know, the way that Dina phrases this, though, is like, no, I think this would be good. And like, as you said, if we do this apart, then when we come together, it'll be even sweeter. And what she kind of phrases it in a way that's a little bit like, what kind of man wouldn't be interested in this scenario? Aren't you a man, Dave? Don't you think like any man would be grateful for this incredible opportunity? And so he still kind of has to go along with it because he's not putting his foot down. And we already know it's gonna be trouble. Before the stuff that happens later in the episode clearly shows that Dina's gonna have a lot easier time going about this than Dave is, because Dave has been out of the game and is just an awkward, weird, nerdy dude who works at a video game company, and Dina is a smoking hot young mom. So it's one of those things where, like, you know, he is uncomfortable, but he doesn't speak up loud enough. And we know this is going to lead to a lot of dramatic tension and problems later. So it's like watching a slow motion car crash, because there's no way that this scenario works out, especially because I think if you do that, both people really need to be on the same page emotionally. And we know that, like, Dave is not interested in this at all. Even if it sounds like a great idea on paper, when it comes time to go to it, he's not going to be able to to pull the trigger because his heart's not going to be in it. So what are you thinking as this whole scene really just shows us like, oh man, they are not being, Dave is not being truthful, and he's going to get his heart stomped.
Yeah, first of all, I am thinking about Dave and Dina's kids in this scene a lot because, like Matt just said, his kids or their kids, they are a bunch of fucking cock blockers. Because every time Dave and Dina try to get intimate, one of their kids interrupts them from doing the deed. Like I said last week, all of their issues would be solved by getting a babysitter, going to a hotel, and doing what they do. But the fact that neither of them think about that simple solution blows my mind. Also, from a writer's perspective, I think that's the writer sort of keeping them in their own sort of bubble and making their problems be their downfall. And I really think that if Dave isn't honest with Dina at some point in the season, it could lead to disaster, like you said. Because later on in this episode, our main guys go to a nightclub, and the second that Dave enters the nightclub, you can see how uncomfortable he is, how tentative he is around women. He is such a fucking dork, and the only thing that he wants to do is talk about his kids. I mean, he tries to pick up one girl, but he ends up showing her. He ends up showing her photos of his kids. And I'm like, man, what the fuck are you doing? You're the guy that wanted to do this. And if you're gonna pick up a chick, the last thing you want to do is show them photos of your kids. When Adam comes over in the same scene, he goes, well, if you're gonna show them photos of your kids, you should have told them that your wife died. Because that would have been an easier way to pick them up. So I'm like, what are you doing?
Which shows us Adam's character in that moment. Although Adam continues to be a piece of shit throughout this entire episode. Because there is a scene early where him and Marjorie go out for lunch. And he says, I'm so swamped at work. I got to make partner. So, if we're going to do this marriage thing that I'm half-heartedly invested in, then you got to plan the whole wedding. Marjorie's having a little bit of a moment of panic where she's like, you want to get married, right? Like, are you scared that we're never going to be with any other new people? And he's like, no, it's fine. Even though we know that's not how he's feeling, because when he's really cheering Dave on, saying like, go get it. And for then they have a bit of a fight because he's like, well, you can plan the wedding because your job is not important. Even though we know she works at a hospital. So, like, obviously her job is probably more important than Adam. And so they have this awkward thing where, like, again, we just know Adam's heart is not in the right place. He's a complete piece of shit. He doesn't really love Marjorie as much as he should, as much as Brian certainly would. And so as these guys go out for guys' night, we already have this thing in our mind, like, is Adam gonna step out on Marjorie because they had this conversation and he was so rude? And if he ever does, what's Brian going to do? Because if Brian knows about it, does he blow up his spot? Does he just let it slide? So, like, all of that is on the table as these two scenes, the scene of them at the lunch and then the guys' night. So that's kind of floating in the air where they are not doing Adam any favors in making us like this guy. Like, we don't like him. Him being with Marjorie continues to just be annoying because they're engaged, but like he really doesn't seem like he cares that much. He belittles her. He's rude. What do you think as they have that talk at lunch and he's like, don't you know how important my job is? I can't be bothered to plan a wedding.
I think Adam thinks that Marjorie is one type of girl, and I think that Adam believes that no matter what he does, Marjorie will always come running home to him and will always rely on him for moral and for moral support, no matter what she has to go through in my life. But I think that Adam, like I said last week, I think that he's in a point in his life where he doesn't know what he wants, and I think something really, really traumatic between Marjorie and Adam is going to have to happen this season for him to realize what a catch he has with Marjorie. He's going to have to almost lose her to really appreciate what he has in Marjorie. The fact that he doesn't want to help her plan the wedding, and the fact that he says, oh, I thought I would leave all the wedding planning to you because that's what girls like, or that's what women's like. That fucking infuriated me, and that made me want to it made me want to punch him in the face. But I am really happy that towards the end of the episode, he does kind of come to his senses, and he does say, okay, since it's our wedding, we're going to do it together. I'm not going to put everything on you. We're going to do this together, and we're going to do it as a team. But he's still a fucking dick, and he will remain a dick until the end of the season, possibly if he doesn't get better. Because I would really like to see what happens to him if Marjorie goes towards Brian for whatever reason. I'm really interested to find out what his views on marriage really are if his best friend stabs him in the back. You mentioned that how far is Brian going to let this go between Adam and Marjorie? And I really think Brian is the type of guy that would stand in the pews as Adam and Marjorie were walking down the aisle. I think he would wait till the last possible second to say, I object to this marriage, because I think that he's that type of guy, which is really unfortunate. And it's really unfortunate that we don't have guys like that in today's society.
Yeah, well, and that would certainly be the way to go for a TV show, have it be the speak now moment and have the guy try and pull it out at that last second. Now, speaking of pulling out at the last second, just say the reason this episode is called 2 in 24 is because Brian does go on that date with Lisa, and even though it kind of goes rough, like he kind of realizes like this chick doesn't have a lot in common with him. They're trying to find common ground on the date, and she just seems kind of like a vapid idiot. And he's like, he sleeps with her. So they do have a night together. And in the morning, she says, I got to go to work. You take your time, have a shower, whatever. I'll see you later. And so it seems like they had a fun night, but she's not really hung up on like, you got to call me, I'm in love with you, or anything like that. And so Brian goes down the hall, and as he's having a shower, has a meet cute with her roommate, Lisa, as well. So a different Lisa. So we got two Lisas. And immediately we realize this is the one that Brian has the chemistry with. They have great banter back and forth. They're having a good time. She's already kind of taken a peek at the merchandise. Everything's working out. And so Brian, kind of in a creepy way, he figures out where she's going to be later because he saw something at the apartment. So he says, I had a good time with Marjorie's friend Lisa, but her roommate, like, I really liked. So maybe I can go to this event she's going to be at and try and pick her up there. And Adam is like, you could go for 2 in 24, 2 women in 24 hours. You can bet them both. You can be a hero. And it's kind of this gross, disgusting thing where, like, he's going to bang both roommates within a 24-hour period. But we know, like, he literally had zero things in common with that first Lisa. Their date was painful. And the sparks are flying with the second Lisa. So we kind of think like, okay, but if he goes for it, how is this going to play with Marjorie? Because obviously word's going to get back to her. And even there's a funny scene where the Lisa he does sleep with first tells Marjorie like, oh, thanks for Brian. He does this really weird thing where he French kisses your belly button. And Marjorie's like, no, I don't want to know anything. Don't tell me anything about sex with Brian. This is off limits. Cut it out. So I thought that was really funny. But what are you thinking as Brian, obviously has this better connection with the roommate, and he decides like, maybe I should go for it by showing up where she's going to be because I got this insider information, so I can, like a stalker, just show up and try and get a date.
I absolutely love the chemistry between Brian and Lisa B. It is so unlike the chemistry that Brian has with the first Lisa, because like you mentioned, in their first sort of semi-date before Brian takes Lisa 1 to bed, it's agonizing because Adam, Marjorie, and Brian and Lisa A for this example are sitting around in Megan's flat, and they're struggling for things to talk about, and it's sad because listen, Lisa A is just a booty call, but I'm really glad that Brian is going to use Lisa B to sort of feel better about this whole Megan thing. But here's the thing. I don't understand why. Well, Well, that's not true. I do understand. I kind of have a problem with Megan having a problem that all these women that she is throwing Brian's way. I kind of have a problem with her not wanting to hear his sexual prowess, because I'm like, these women wouldn't have been talking to you about Brian's sexual prowess if you didn't throw these women towards his way. So why did you do that? I mean, I know why you did that, but why did you do that? So I'm like, so what? You're gonna sit here and torture yourself? But just one more thing about Lisa B. It's like I said, I love their chemistry, but I really think if they get intimate with one another, I think that this can possibly lead to a possible relationship or possible disaster, because I don't really think Brian can get emotional with somebody else about the things that matter. I think that he can only go so far as sleeping with someone. I think he's a surface level kind of person. And when the chips are, when the sex is over and when the good times are over, when it comes time for Lisa B to really get to know him, I think that some problems might pop up eventually. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right, especially because if they meet in these suspect circumstances, everything needs to be off with Lisa 1 before he makes the move on Lisa 2, because otherwise later it's going to come back to haunt him. If she finds out that, they hooked up right after they hooked up together, then she's going to be mad at her roommate, and her roommate's going to be in a bad spot. So like there's a lot of ins and outs of the situation, and Brian tries to talk to his sister about it. So again, they try to give Brian a sounding board who he can open up more to. So he does have a scene with Nick where they chat a little bit, but that's quickly derailed because he finds out from Nick that her husband is at a sperm bank trying to give a donation. And so rather than have their heart to heart, he's like, give me your phone. I got to call this guy while he's spanking it at a hospital. And so we know that after they lost the baby last week, Nicole and Angelo are going to try to have a baby. They see a fertility specialist who says, shower her in sperm, which is disgusting. And then they realize they got to check everybody's equipment. So Angelo tries to make a deposit, and Brian pranks him by calling him right when he's about to watch this dirty video in a clinical space and give his sample. And then it is a funny scene where he's like, well, I can't do this. And Nick is like, you can do it. And she takes the phone and starts, phone sexing him while she's at Zap Monkey. And we see a dude who's just buying something at the vending machine, overhearing this whole dirty talk and looking scandalized, but also totally into it like a creepy perv. So I thought that was interesting that, again, they're trying to show us that Brian's sister and him have the relationship where he can be honest, but things keep getting in the way. So they actually never really resolve any of their conversations so far in these first episodes. So I find their dynamic a little bit odd because they keep having scenes together, but they don't really have a great brother-sister chemistry. I don't feel them as comfortable with each other as you would be if you had known somebody your whole life. And I don't know if that's just a casting thing or if it's, not fair to say that Rosanna Arquette, I think, might just be miscast. But that was interesting that whole, fertility storyline we know is going to be leading to a bad spot. I'm sure it's either going to be happy where they get pregnant and they have to deal with the baby and everything's great. But this is a TV drama, so it's probably going to get to a spot where they realize they can't have a child together, and then do they stay together or not, because one of them is going to really want children and one of them is probably going to be like, I'd rather have you. And I'm sure that it's going to be a blockade that will rear its head in the final couple episodes of this season. What do you think about that whole situation?
When it comes to Nicole and Angelo and the whole sperm bank thing, I really think that shows a sort of psychological divide between the two of them, because I think there's going to come a moment in the season where Angelo says, listen, if we can have a baby, we'll have a baby. And if we can't have a baby, it's fine. You are enough for me. I don't need a child to love you that much more. And I think that is a problem with a lot of couples who have been together for so many years. They think having a child will invigorate their relationship to a certain point where they can learn to love each other again. And if they don't have that, they're stuck in sort of this limbo, sort of this limbo hell of trying to figure out why they got together in the first place. And I really think that Nikki might be afraid of that. She might have a complex of going, I'm not enough, or I need to give him something more, when the one thing that Angelo has always wanted is her, and she is enough for him. But I think it's gonna take her a long time to get to that, and I'm really afraid that she's gonna put herself through all these medical trials to have to make it easier for her to possibly conceive with Angelo and not tell her. And I think that is going to drive a bigger divide in between them, even bigger than the one that they have now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and as you said, thinking that kids can fix everything, we certainly know from the other half of this episode that kids don't fix everything, because Dina and Dave, Dave trying to work his game at the club and it not going good, and, trying to pick up delivery woman, like things just don't go good. But Dina, again, one of these members of this couple is going to have a much easier time, has a moment where the kids are screaming at drop off and the baby has shit their pants. She's got to change a diaper. And as she's changing a diaper after the kid madness, up pulls hot dad John Hamm, who pre-Mad Men John Hamm, seeing him with the longest hair I've ever seen him have on screen. His voice is like 2 octaves higher than it normally is in Don Draper mode. And he's like, hey, the kids are going to a park later. Maybe we should meet up. And she's like, yeah, okay. And I'm thinking, oh shit, this is Dave's worst nightmare happening right before our eyes. And they meet up, and as they're hanging out, he says, oh, we call you the hot mom. And she's like, no, get out of here. You don't do that. He's like, oh yeah, we do. And she's like, okay, well, hot compared to what? These other women are horrible. And he's like, well, yeah, those other women are horrible. But so they talk, and they're kind of hitting it off. And that's when Dave phones and says, I'm going out for guys' night. And she's like, okay, and doesn't put up a fight. And then John Hamm's like, oh, your husband's going out for guys' night? Well, let's order some pizza and get together with the kids. And so that's what happens. She basically goes on a date with her kids and John Hamm and his kid. And they really have like some chemistry and some stuff going on here where, earlier Dave didn't put his foot down. Even when Dave makes the joke of let's drink milk together, and she's like, get the fuck out of here. I'm not interested in this shit. But her and Hamm, she wants ham. She don't want milk. She wants some ham. What are you thinking as John Hamm and her really start to heat things up?
I really, first of all, I love John Hamm, but I fell in love with John Hamm from a little movie called The Town. You guys might have heard of it. I wasn't a really big fan of Mad Men until it came to Netflix. Great show, by the way. But John Hamm in this show is he's a fucking asshole, because I really love how when Dina is in the drop off line dealing with her 911 baby emergency, how John Hamm just sort of pulls up and says, hey, we're gonna meet at the park we're gonna meet at the park 3:00 later if you want to come and hang out. And I love how when Dina shows up at the park, the only person there is John Hamm. So I'm like, you motherfucker, you didn't invite anybody. You just invited her. And I really, really would have liked if we would have seen some other moms talk to Dina and let her know how much of a possible dirtbag John Hamm's character was. And even if she had somebody speak to her and tell her to watch out for this guy, all he wants is your hoo-ha. I think it would have been really interesting to see her go for him anyway, despite all the warnings from the other moms, because watching her potentially get into a relationship with John Hamm, based on the parameters that she built with Dave, really makes her look desperate. And I don't know how comfortable I am with that. And the reason why is because I love Dave, and I just really wish that he would grow a fucking pair. And I don't want I don't want Dina to break his heart, which I think that's going to happen. So that's why I made up the whole scenario to make her look a little bit more at fault if a relationship with John Hamm develops at some point. Do you think I'm crazy?
Oddly, in this scenario, if John Hamm is just a hit it and quit it kind of guy, that's actually what it should be. Because if she's going to just step outside of the marriage for sex, then it should just be not an emotional thing. It should just be them doing the physical shit and then getting on with it. But the fact that it feels like a little bit more because they are talking and they are hanging out is more of the betrayal, because she's not supposed to have an actual relationship outside of the marriage. It's just supposed to be physical. And so if it becomes something more, or if she interprets it as something more, even if Hamm is a womanizer, then that's the betrayal. That's the bad thing. And even when Dave comes home after the guys' night and finds the kids in bed with Dina, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so happy to be home. Oh, I love you guys so much." And he cuddles up, and we see that she's still awake but pretending to be asleep. It's kind of heartbreaking because we know he can't go through with this stuff, and we're thinking she's already taking the steps to go through with it, and that's going to be an unfortunate situation moving forward.
Yeah, I just, this is really agonizing because the writing on this show is done so well, and I really love how the first 2 episodes have really endeared me to almost all these characters. I'm sorry, Nicole and Angelo. You need to go away, like Nikki and that other guy from Lost. You need to just.
Yeah, Nikki and Paolo.
Get out! Thank you. Go on a boat somewhere. But I really love the way that these characters are drawn, and the way that the creator and the writers of the show have made me like these characters. I think I really wish that shows today would be more like this, because unfortunately we don't have shows like this anymore. Now I don't know if that's the sort of bad robot, me wearing bad robot eyes, but I really think that this is a show that sort of gives me 30-something vibes. If maybe I'm dating myself a little bit. To get back on track, I really would like to see what happens between Dina and John Hamm's character, and whatever it is, it's not going to be fucking good. The other thing that I would love to see, like I mentioned before, I'm very intrigued to see the way that the relationship develops between Brian and Lisa B. And I think it's going to be heartbreaking. I think it's going to piss me off, because I almost want Brian to end up with Lisa B more than I do Marjorie, which is ridiculous, because this woman just came on the scene. And if you guys have been listeners of our show for a very long time, I felt hook, line, and sinker for a character in Alias that Matt waited weeks for me to yellow at her for. So maybe that'll be, or maybe this situation will be similar to that situation, except without assassins and all that stuff. So with that being said, guys, I think that'll do it for this edition of Radio 815. Listen, guys, if you love what we do here and you want to send us an email to tell us how awesome we are, or to tell us to shut up a little bit more and keep it a little bit more concise, you can send us an email at radio815@aol.com. If you want to reach out to me personally, I am still on that goddamn fucking burning ship, formerly known as Twitter, but now it's X. If you want to talk to me there, I'm at CreekFanatic88. But Matt, if the good folks want to chat with you, what would be the best place for them to do that on?
They can log some movies with me on Letterboxd. I am at MDC3000.
All right, guys. So until next time, as I often say, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.